everybody, and welcome to Batwoman Book Club. I'm here with my friend from around the world, Fangirl. Fangirl, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. It's a very tough weather here today, but I'm staying warm.
And what do we have in store for today? We've actually taken a pretty big leap in Batwoman, and where are we now in our reading?
We're at Batman Detective Comics in Rebirth for Rise of the Batman and Victim Syndicate, which both features Batwoman as one of the lead. And that's where we kind of jumped to after the New 52 J.H. Williams' run that we completed.
Right, and so if you're feeling like, wait, did I miss something? You missed something that we didn't actually cover. After the J.H. Williams run ends with issue number 24, a different writer picks it up and follows Batwoman through the end of that run, and we chose not to feature it on Book Club because we just didn't have that much to say about it. But the other thing is, Batwoman does start appearing in some other places, and that's the only way that you really knew who she was, right? Because she turns up once or twice in Batman and Robin Eternal, one of those weekly books.
No, she shows up in Batman and Robin in volume 6. I forgot the issue number, but it was just a page because everyone else was going off to doing some adventures, and I don't want to spoil it because it's a big spoiler for Batman and Robin. And they kind of come and tell Kate that, oh, hey, can you take care of Gotham while we're all away? And as if, Gotham doesn't have police department. But yeah, so that's kind of what happens. And that's the first time I kind of known a little bit about, first time I saw her in a comic book.
But I think that creates the interesting contrast and why I was shocked when I started reading this run. I did not read it because I thought it had Batwoman. I just read it because I was trying to catch up on some Rebirth. And it starts with Batman bringing Batwoman into the fold. And previously, every example of Batwoman interacting with the Bat family tends to be like in the absence of Batman, or Batman is busy. Batman never really is like, let's deliberately team up. The closest we get is in the beginning of Grant Morrison's Batman Incorporated. It's the closest you get to like a straight up Batwoman Batman team up. So just like opening the issue and seeing that, I was kind of shocked. And then the other thing is, I was like, oh, like this is kind of dumb for her to be a team member. Like, not that she's as experienced as Batman, but she's certainly not a kid like some of these other members. But that's not what happens. What actually winds up happening?
Well, and one of the other thing is, though, that before we kind of talked about in our previous book club that we weren't sure her relationship with Bruce Wayne. Right. But in Rebirth, they retconned all of that.
They made it real simple. Real simple.
Yeah, they made it real simple. They're first cousins.
Yeah.
They're like, Martha Kane was the sister to, I'm forgetting his first name, the other Kane, like the Colonel Kane.
The Colonel,
and, Colin Kane, and they are cousins. They're first cousins. So it's very simple. I don't know whether it's okay, I guess, but the thing is, like, there's also like this shocking thing is like, Bruce comes to her and then say that, oh, we need to be prepared because there is a CD, like a shady corporation or like a group of people is taking down all the Bat family people or people like all the vigilantes in Gotham, and he comes to Kate and then Batwoman and said that, oh, we need to, like, I need your help to do that. And he's like, oh, I need, they Peter patter about trust, and then he takes the mask off to reveal that, he's Bruce Wayne, and she's like, yeah, I know, you should have told me earlier. And, apparently she knew from like 1.5 years, that her cousin is Batman. So yeah, there was a little moment like that. And then we also see there's like another flashback moment that comes up later, that Kate talking to Bruce at the funeral for his parents. So there was like, some kind of cool interactions there.
I think it really works for me because I think we were so confused, and we were reading the books really closely so we could talk about them. And I think we were totally confused about how their relationship worked and how they were related. So like, fine, make them first cousins. It's like a little overly convenient that she coincidentally becomes Batman or Batwoman when her cousin is Batman. And yet it kind of like simplifies their whole family connection thing and their wealth. And so like, it just doesn't really bug me that much. I think it's convenient.
Yeah, it's one of those things, but it's another thing. Like, I would rather prefer that if someone completely disconnected from. But the thing is, you know what? No, I take that back because she didn't know that it was Bruce Wayne. Like, when she first heard the idea of Batman, it later revealed that there was a different event that led her to discover him. So it's in a way that's okay. So it wasn't like, oh, my cousin's Batman, so I should become Batwoman. So, in that case, like, it can be forgiven.
Yeah, it's kind of right on the line of what we talked about, how we were actually excited she was a relative stranger. She still came to being Batwoman as a stranger, and
Right.
that's what matters, because it's not like the Colonel knew he was Bruce Wayne when he was like encouraging her to be Batwoman,
Right.
even though he had a much greater plan, as we find out in this arc. And his
Right.
greater plan did have to do with Batman, but it wasn't with the knowledge of who Batman was. So all of that is like parenthetical to saying,
Right.
when he reveals himself to her in these first couple of issues, actually
That
the
sounds
first
very
one,
naughty.
it was a very familial, totally benign reveal.
Right.
She's like, I'm not here to be your team member. And he's like, oh, I'm not asking you to be a member. He basically is putting her in charge of the training of these characters. And I have to think, for a longer time DC reader, which you are more so than me, do you even feel like some of these characters need training? Red Robin, spoiler, Orphan, like, okay, Clayface is a mess, but does Red Robin need mentorship? Does Spoiler need mentorship?
Spoiler does, though, because if I'm thinking correctly, Spoiler becomes Spoiler at the end in Batman Eternal. And I don't have any previous knowledge before that of Spoiler, so let that be the spoiler. But yeah, so the thing is, like, I think she probably needed it because she kind of decided, and it's a spoiler for Batman Eternal, that her father turned out to be the mastermind who was a D-list villain, and there's like a lot of drama around that, and she's like, it's like, I need to become better than that, and then so she does, with the help of Red Robin, actually. So I think she does. And Cassandra Cain, Orphan, as we later find, like, in the part 3, volume 3, which we are not doing for this book club, that's where you can see that she's an extremely good fighter, but she has no self-control, or she doesn't, so I think she needs a more spiritual mentor. And Clayface, as you said, he's Clayface, so he needs a mother, like, or he needs a parent. But the thing is, like, yeah, I think, like, in a way they do. And I think one of the things I wanted to kind of come out and say, that I really enjoyed that idea that it's a new group of Bat family. It's a new prodigies that they have. Like, Rebirth didn't begin with, oh, it's going to be Dick Grayson, Jason Todd, Barbara Gordon, and we're going to do it again. No, they have grown up so much. Like, those characters have developed so much now. They can be their own heroes. We're going to bring in a new group of young Gothamites, or from however reason they're connected, and they're going to be the new face of the Bat family.
I completely, wholeheartedly agree with you. I think it was genius.
Right.
I never in my heart thought that I would care about a Bat family team book. But partially it's because I mostly want to read them on their own. I like reading Batgirl on her own, or in Birds of Prey. I like reading Nightwing on his own. And the thought of smushing them all into a team seems like overkill. It's fun when they get together every so often. But this team, it feels they have things to learn. They're young, they're more broken.
Exactly.
And it was really, really satisfying. It kind of feels like when Marvel pulls together kind of like some B-list types of Avengers for like a secondary Avengers title. And the thought behind it is like, okay, well, they're not all going to get their own solo titles. So wouldn't you rather pull all of the readers and fans from these characters together and support a title that can actually move the plot forward of our universe, rather than just keep doing these like 6-issue canceled series? Because I don't know that any of these characters could carry their own series other than maybe Batwoman.
But the thing is, like, no, I feel like it's a step forward, yes. Because a comic book as an industry has like, I don't know, it's their kryptonite that they can't move forward. It's always going to be the same people again and again, falling after the same thing. But I think with Rebirth, some of that has been a straight cut, like, especially with the New 52 and then Rebirth, that is like, okay, now we're moving on. We're pushing forward. And one of the things that I would say, that having read pretty much entirety of all the Bat books in New 52, it gives a complete different perspective, because now I can see what was being done in Batman Eternal. They were actually setting all of this up. Like, especially the 52 issues of New in Batman Eternal, which gets a lot of flack for not being great. To me, it's fantastic. It's really good. So, but that's what it was doing. It was setting up all these people there so that by the time Rebirth came around, you kind of understand how they knew each other. Like, do you know that why Red Robin and Spoilers are together?
No.
Okay, so that happens in Batman Eternal. So it's like, because Spoiler was so broken up that her father was the one who was and it was actually Red Robin who gives the whole speech that your father doesn't define you and all of that. It makes complete sense.
Well, and I mean, I only know Cassandra Cain, I only know Spoiler by reputation of her having been a previous Stephanie, because Cassandra's the other one. I only know Spoiler by reputation of her being a previous Batgirl who I've never even read. So like I don't pretend to understand any of that. But I think you bring up something really interesting of like they had kind of all made their own connections with each other. But here we have the end of the first issue. Batwoman says, "You've earned Batman's trust. You have not earned mine."
Right.
It's so interesting on multiple levels. It's interesting because it like sets up the conflict of her not really trusting all of these kind of miscreant kids, but it also sets up that like, is Batman too trusting? Like, does he have such a high barrier for entry to let you into his family? But then once you're in the family, it's kind of like he can't see all the wrong that you're doing no more than anybody else. Like he never fully trusts anybody, but he's also not going to come down on you too hard either. And Batwoman's like, you can trust them a little bit, but you can't not chastise them, train them, correct them. And it just feels like they're at like two totally different levels of how they view this team.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, we know historically Batman is a terrible mentor. Like, he often gets them killed. Yeah. So it's like, okay. But the thing is, like, why hasn't authority showed up to his? Okay, that's different conversation.
Yeah,
sorry.
Trust me, I'm happy to criticize Batman for the whole episode because you know my feelings. But
I'm very passionate about Batman. I'm one of his biggest fans. But like Ulysses. but the thing is, like, yeah, and he often does that, as you pointed out, like in terms of like, oh, this kid is in a problem, so I'm gonna come and then bring them under my leathery wing and then try to give them some training and then just take them out. And kids do what kids does. They are overtly confident and they think that they're better than the adults and they get themselves killed. So then now Batwoman is like, well, good job. You have the bat symbol on you, but you have to be better, more than that. You have to be better than that. So I think, it's kind of like a juxtapose between Batman's way of mentoring versus Batwoman's way of mentoring.
And to me, that's why it's so interesting. But then if that had just been if it had just been them like beating up cops and robbers and that was the main point of it, I probably would have totally liked it. But then there's this whole other layer of the colony, which are soldiers trained in Batman style techniques. That are being deployed in Gotham to try to thwart a potential uprising from the League of Shadows, which may or may not even be a real thing. And even before we get into the reveal of who's in charge of the colony, which makes it even deeper and more messed up, that to me is like super intriguing. That like, I don't feel like DC plays as much with the government doing things with superheroes as Marvel does generally in my DC reading. And I know that there's like Amanda Waller and then there's also like the Justice League of America, but it just seemed really interesting to me to have a military say like, not all these people have superpowers. We don't have to learn how to be Superman. We could learn how to be Batman, and I just found like that was a really like, yeah, why wouldn't the military try to learn how to be Batman? And they give him a terrific speech at one point of like, do you see all the good you could be doing if we dropped you into these terrorist foxholes around the globe and into these situations? Like, you're so tied up in Gotham that you, as a solo operator, that you only care about these things when you're in the Justice League. But we could be making you so much more effective if you would just let somebody else partner with you. And I thought it was compelling because it's an effective critique, just like Batwoman is an effective critique of Batman. And I think it's interesting to poke holes in him a little bit.
Right. And the thing is, like, this is something that I always wondered. Where is the United States military when Gotham is literally falling apart every day? You know, because it's such a crime-ridden, like it's portrayed as such a crime-ridden thing. Like if this was happening anywhere else, by now someone would have said, "Okay, emergency state, you guys have failed to govern yourself. We're taking over," kind of thing. But it's kind of like, you know, it's like, and also that I would think that U.S. military would have reached out to Batman to see like, okay, we need you to help us kind of train something and things like that. But it seems like over here somebody did, and we find out who that is, and then decided to take, even though it wasn't. Well, here's the thing. Like I kind of went ahead and read volume 3 and 4. Have you?
I have. I don't want to spoil it too heavily for people watching because I want people to go and read them.
Right. Yeah. So the thing is, okay, in that case, like I'm not gonna reveal it, but the thing is, like, yeah, it's a kind of, even though it kind of appears the motivation behind it was a little bit based on a myth, and they tried to go the route of Captain America Winter Soldier, where it's like we're gonna kill all these people who are our enemy, who may or may not be associated with League of Shadow. We think they are, and obviously Batman always gets butthurt when someone's killed in his name, but maiming is okay. So, so that's where the friction begins, and I think like I personally thought it was interesting that for the first time, DC is kind of brought down to a bit of a reality, you know, bit of our reality in the sense like, okay, armies involved and things like that. And yeah, so it was kind of it was an interesting plot.
Well, and you're right. This plot, it straight up cribs from Winter Soldier. I mean, it combines, there's some elements that are not exactly from Winter Soldier, but I think it would be hard to call the plot, the overarching plot of this first arc, revolutionary because it's really straight from the movie. But there are twists that make it interesting. And one of the twists is that maybe there is a League of Shadows or maybe there's not. And the books that we're talking about today make no comment on if it's real or not.
Right.
Really all about the whole, like, we've got a helicarrier that might kill a bunch of people aspect of the Winter Soldier.
Right.
But then the other big reveal, which you're in it for book club, so we're going to talk about what's in the book, is that
hold on, drum roll.
The person behind the colony is Kate Kane's father, the Colonel Kane. It made me so happy because I was like, no wonder he's been skulking around Gotham all of these years. He's had a mandate from the government to like train a whole soldier corps by absorbing Batman's talents and observing him. And like, what better way to do that than to encourage your own daughter to emulate Batman? It's like so twisted and perfect that just like the coincidence of making them more closely related, I didn't really mind it because the story was good. Like, I think a good story forgives all terrible plot tropes. And in this case, even though the story was borrowed from another piece of media, it still forgave the terrible plot trope of revealing that it was her dad who was kind of like the villain the entire time.
And you know, I kind of agree with it because the thing is like one thing to be what I understood from it. I don't care whether that's true or not, but I'm taking it as my reality that New 52 happened in this world. So yes. New 52 happened.
At least for Batman it did. For other characters it's a little shakier, but Batman's New 52 is almost verbatim canonical. I mean, they talk about year zero in this arc.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. So if Batman 52 happened, that means Kate Kane's all of that things happened, and that means that, you know, yes, you are right that, you know, Colonel Kane was here for a very long time. But at the same time, one thing that kind of annoyed me, I'm like, of course they're showing him as a bad guy, but then we're gonna find out, oh, he's not the bad guy. He's never gonna be the truly bad guy unless all expectation, like, you know, unless they really shatter all my expectation and actually maintain him as a bad guy. I don't know whether that's gonna happen or not, but the thing is, like, it just like I'm like, like, you know, it's a bit, that's kind of like, I'm like, well,
Well, you know, I really thought, now we're getting towards the end of this arc, I thought what it did that was so interesting, and I think what James Tynion does across the entire run of Detective, I believe it ends on 981, so we're like 4 or 5 issues from the end right now, is he plays with this idea of like a moral spectrum that all of these characters are on, and nobody gets to be fully villainous or fully non-villainous. And eventually this creates a huge rift between Batman, Batwoman, and other members of the team. But right now it's kind of like you have Batman who's like, we don't kill ever, but we do everything all on our own. You have Batwoman who's like, we have to rely on other resources. At one point, she calls in her father after Batman gets captured by the colony, not realizing that his father is the leader of the colony. But that's part of Batwoman's morality of like, killing can sometimes be appropriate if it's the only answer, and so can asking for help. And then you have all the way on the other side, the Colonel. I don't think he's evil. Like he's the bad guy in terms of this arc, and he's making a morally compromised decision in terms of should we assassinate all of these potential League of Assassin people what if only 1 in 600? They give the number as 600. What if only 1 of 600 of them was the person who was maybe going to blow up the city? Now, we could get into a whole real life philosophical debate about the efficacy and morality of drone strikes, because that's what effectively the story is doing. But he's operating based on a specific code of morals, and he does have a sense of his moral compass of what is morally right. It doesn't mean you have to agree with him, but he certainly does. He's not the Riddler, he's not Poison Ivy, who is good as she can sometimes be. Sometimes she just does things because she likes plants. Like the Colonel has a specific belief system.
Right, and that's all fun and good, but the thing is, like, this being Colonel, I'm like, well, yeah, but they're gonna somehow justify it if they ever wants to bring him back to, like, if he ever wants to bring that whole Kate Kane and her father's relationship, and then also have Kate Kane part of the Bat family. So it's going to be one or the other. Because if she embraced the father, her father, then her relationship with Bruce, like with Batman, will come to an end. So it's going to be, they will have to pick, like, I don't know how this kind of works out afterwards, but that's probably going to be somehow involved. That storyline will somehow be involved.
Yeah, I think it goes to this idea of like the heightened reality of comics. Like no choice between two potential paths can be made easy. And I think as a result, sometimes it makes it look like they're so opposed. Like you can only have the Colonel or Batman, and there's no halfway, and they're back to back, and you can only go one, in one direction with either of them. But,
but knowing that.
There's room for nuance, though, because the Colonel is a patriot, and he's not doing it just to kill people. He's doing it for Gotham. I just think there's room still for his character.
Well, if you know a lot about Batman as much as I do,
I'm not a Batman expert.
No, because
Batman card on me.
No, because the reason I say that, because, Batman works in this like such a rigid belief system that he never forgives anyone who kills or who attempts to kill. So it's gonna be that. And that's one of the reasons, because I really love Batwoman's involvement with Bat Family. I don't want her to be like a solo operator. And the thing is, it feels like this is gonna be temporary, because she's gonna be probably choosing no one, neither of them. And then she's going to go on to her solo thing. And this whole thing is going to end. And that's kind of thing that I was like, but then again, it's all like speculation on my part. I don't know how the story goes past volume 4, which is, I think, 952, I think, or 962. I don't know anything that happens afterwards. So, don't hold me to that.
Well, that's useful information, though, because I haven't read Batman long enough to know that. But also, that tends to be my objection to Batman. I guess I'm much more of a, to use my familiar characters, I'm much more of like a Wolverine than a Captain America. I'm like, you sometimes gotta kill them. And
Captain America does, though.
Does he? Well, right. We've talked about how sometimes only in the context of being a soldier, but even that is more like Batman. Like it's just so interesting to me that Batman and Superman are like so like no kill, whereas Wonder Woman is like, well, if it's on the field of battle and I have to kill them, like I am the god of war.
Yeah, but the thing is that it's one of his flaw. That's one of his flaw. It used to be one of his biggest strength, but nowadays that's one of his biggest flaw, that he is not going to kill. Like that's like a rigid line he's never going to cross. So it's kind of like, there is a lot we can talk. I can talk on and on about that, because he actually maims people to the point their life is effectively over, but he won't kill. So there's a lot to talk about that. But anyway, we don't want to end this discussion of this without talking about Red Robin,
because
he's the focus character of the. So that's one of the cool thing about Tinian's run, though. Each trade paperback, like the story arc that's in each trade paperback, focuses on one character. So first one was Batwoman and Red Robin was the first two character spotlight. So so one of the things, like, do you want to reveal what happens to Red Robin?
Before we do, I want to give people a chance to be like, oh, but also I want to talk about the art, because I think the reveal of what happens is tied closely into art. So Eddie Barrows does this whole run. He's always one of my favorite DC artists. He did a lot of Nightwing and New 52. He just draws really appealing figures. They're on model. They have great faces. He choreographs terrific action. But in this run, he does this very specific thing where he will have a whole scene on a page, but then he pops out one character, and he usually does them in like a 3/4 profile, like bust, like from the chest up. And he does them in a more painterly way where it's got like more subtle shading in the rendering. And it's even winds up being colored a little bit more differently, like almost like it's being colored with like something soft, like a colored pencil or a pastel, rather than like a glossier comic color. And it tends to pull out the moments where the characters are having like a real emotional reckoning with each other. And if you go back through this first 6 issues of Detective, you'll see that he manages to do it with almost every character. And that's like our signal that we're getting things about their emotional life.
You talking about the art, I was going to talk about it too, that I really enjoyed the art in here.
Well, the reason I brought it up is because I think it feeds into the big Red Robin reveal, which is that we get this really emotional scene between Spoiler and Red Robin when they're at home, that it turns out that Tim Drake, Red Robin, has been accepted into this Ivy University program where he can go and really use his genius for the greater good. But he's in Gotham right now, and Batman has finally given him the ability to be in charge enough to change Gotham. And we get a lot of moments pulled out between the two of them where Spoiler is like, well, don't you want to grow and evolve? Shouldn't you think about doing this? And Red Robin's like, I just can't turn my back on Batman. I can't turn my back on Gotham. And this becomes literal in the finale because the drones get released, and the only way to get them to not target their targets is to have them target something else. And so being like the team hacker, Red Robin has them all target him, and he's going to face off against these dozens, if not hundreds of drones, all alone in their headquarters in the Belfry, while all the other Bat characters are stranded around the city because they were going to try to defend each individual group of people against the drones, which is a losing battle. So like tactically it's sound, but it's a self-sacrifice play. And there's also this idea that's like making tangible this thing that he keeps getting spotlighted by the art, which is that he can't decide if he can turn his back on Gotham long enough to live his life. And this makes it like literal, like he's not going to get to live his life because he can't turn his back on Gotham. Right.
And the thing is, like, I kind of always like, I don't know much about Team Drake. Like, you know, where he's first started. I only know him from the New 52 run, and he was always one of those like know-it-all genius kind of Robin. Like compared to the other Robins who were more about their physical abilities. Like, you know, he's the only one who is like a genius as well as like a super awesome fighter. And I think Luke Fox, who later becomes Batwing, is a kind of very similar spectrum. So to me, that, you know, I necessarily was not invested in him from, like, you know, throughout the run, but I think like some of the decisions he make and some of the arc that happens over here, I actually begin to care for him. Like, you know, I was like, oh, you know, I see, like, you know, your inner struggle.
Yeah, and I again, not DC history expert, but I have done a Robin page, so I have had to research a little bit. And he's the Robin, of course, that came after Jason Todd, who gets like quite brutally, seemingly killed in a lonely place of dying. And he kind of like, he elbows his way in a little bit more as Robin than previous Robins, where Batman has, as you said, like extended his leathery wing. But that kind of creates like the conflict because like he wasn't one of these like lonely orphans that Batman felt compelled to take on. And later he is orphaned because his dad dies as part of Identity Crisis. But it's much later in his development. And I knew New 52 like tinkered with his Robin history. So I don't know like what he is now. But he definitely has a very different relationship with Bruce Wayne than either Nightwing or Red Hood does. And it culminates in this page. It's shocking and it's beautiful of him being just gunned down. Like he's fought off dozens and dozens of these drones. None of the Bat characters can make it back, and he makes his last stand and he dies. He loses, and he's reduced to ash, seemingly.
Right. Yeah. This is the page that you were talking about. Like
Yeah.
it's pretty tough. Like, it was a pretty tough one. And I'm like, wait, what happened? And then I was like, I actually had to go back because I was kind of reading it and I was like, oh, okay, fight scenes. I kind of glaze over them a little bit. But then yeah, so when this I'm like, oh no, and then and in the sense that that is, yes, it's actually at the back of here. But a little part of me, cynic part of me, I'm like, well, did he actually die? And then, a couple pages later, we realize, no, he didn't.
Well, and that's what I want to actually talk about before we will take a little break, and then we'll do the second half of our reading for today. Immediately, whenever you see a character that big die, there's a lot of people that say, okay, well, when is he going to be brought back, right? It's just, we all know that no character stays on the shelf for more than 2 or 3 years max these days.
Right.
But it's pretty rare that you see a character die in an extreme enough circumstance that it like chokes you up and brings tears to your eyes. And then they're back to 2 pages later. And even knowing that, because I've read this before, I still got choked up reading because it's such a big moment. And like Batman's trying to get there in time and he can't get there. And he's like, Alfred, do anything, break the speed of sound or the sound barrier,
right?
Do it, and nothing works. And even knowing that he was going to come back to issue 2 pages later, it still got me. But what do you think about that? Do you think we should have had an issue break before we realized that he was still alive, or do you think it made it more interesting to dive right into the mystery of like, where is he?
No, do it right away. That's what I say. Because the thing is, like, we know that. We know as now as a comic book reader that he's not gonna stay dead. So just might as well. Like let's do it. And the thing is, like, here it's actually culminating to the big finale, right? I mean, I don't know, I haven't read forwards, but the thing is, like, the whole idea is that each storyline is kind of standalone with the character focus, but then there's an overarching plot that connects every one of them. So this is it. Like, this is kind of like every story you kind of get a little bit of pieces, and I think that's it shows up again and again in later arcs. So yeah, I think it was a good setup because it's like, you don't know, they don't tell you where he is or what he's doing, but then they tell you that he's still alive. At least his consciousness is alive somewhere.
Right. Well, and the thing that I don't want to fully spoil, but the place where he is and the person who's keeping him captive ties into a much larger theme in Rebirth.
Okay.
Which gets resolved not in Detective Comics. Detective Comics resolves a piece of it during this run, but like the grander part of it is actually resolved in Superman and Action Comics. And so it's kind of part of, like, I think DC did a really good job of seeding a lot of universe-wide things into different titles so they all kind of felt relevant, which is something that Marvel says they're going to do a lot. They produce these promo images, right, and they're like, it's all connected, or all these characters are going to matter, right? They love doing that. They do the one big Joe Quesada image and say everybody's going to matter, and then they don't. Whereas DC did not make a lot of noise about how all of these things are going to be connected, but the Detective connects to Action and Superman. Titans has a big chunk of what's connected going into Doomsday Clock. Like, Wonder Woman winds up having the big Darkseid plot coming out of the Darkseid War saga at the end of New 52. Like, they've really spread the love around so that it's not any one title that's really the only one that's driving the plot of the universe forward. And it was really satisfying to me to like feel, it made me want to go read the Superman titles after I read Detective. And then it turned out the Superman run was amazing too. And I'm a noted DC hater. Free has seen me say to a commenter, I'm not going to read XYZ run because it's DC and I don't have time for that. And I am now reading pretty much every single Rebirth comic book. Like, they've completely turned me into a DC zombie from a Marvel zombie with developments like this one.
Right. Well, that's kind of very interesting because I didn't know that actually gets resolved in Action Comics. Now I have to look at Action Comics. But but okay, yeah.
Well, again, the part specifically related to Red Robin resolves here, but the grander arc of why he doesn't die and where he is resolved in Action Comics. So that's a good play. We're gonna take a breath, and then we're gonna come back and talk about 2 more issues of Detective Comics, as well as the first arc of Batwoman's own title that started in 2017.